You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the Unholy Trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. I am back, comfortably zoned, Alameda, California at the 420 Studios, hanging with my friend Rich Hunter and just talk about what life is all about. He's my buddy. He's from Oakland, born and raised, and probably one of the 5 interesting people I've met in the past 5 years, most interesting people I've met in the last 5 years. He has definite thoughts and opinions about 3 things that we've talked about. His personal spirituality, and he conveys it in a way that impressed me, and I'm not impressed often by Bible talk and all that stuff, but he makes a point for points that I haven't even thought of, that we're going to get into in shows to follow, and the Kennedy conspiracy, which has been beaten into the ground a little bit, and what with the anniversary of his passing, the 50-year anniversary, one of the most articulate people I've ever spoken to along those lines, and it's been something that interested me since I was 16 years old, and a year after the assassination, a book comes out, Mark Lane's book, Rush to Judgment, and I'm 16, teaching me that it was all bullshit. Everything that they put together with the government and the Warren Commission was all a bunch of shit that just couldn't have gone down that way. And 50 years later, we're still debating it. Rich knows a shitload of stuff about that. We'll talk about that. But tonight, first show where he's on, Rich, you're on.
Yeah, this is Rich Hunter.
All right, Rich Hunter. Tonight we're gonna talk about cards. Anybody ever want to go up to the lake and get rich? Anybody wonder why when they go up to the lake, they generally don't get rich? And when I say the lake, we're in Northern California. I'm referring to Lake Tahoe, which is close to Reno, where gambling is legal in Nevada, and it's also legal in Las Vegas. So if I say you want to go to Vegas, people get on a plane, they'll take you down there, they'll put you up if you're a high spender. Ever wonder why and how they can do that and yet attract so many people to keep coming back? And ever wonder how maybe, just maybe, you might be able to beat the system? So, to answer those questions, Oakland's Rich Hunter. Go at it, big boy.
Well, as far as cards go, you have to remember something, that they're not there to give you money. That's not the business they're in. And if the state of Nevada gets a percentage of everything the house takes, then the question to ask is whether or not it's in the state's interest to make sure that the house plays you a fair game. And the obvious answer is, of course not. The state isn't there to make sure that the house plays fair and plays you a fair game. The house is there, the state's there to make sure that you don't cheat the house. Because if you cheat the house, you're cutting into the state's percentage, and they are most certainly not having any of that. Okay? So, all the games that are up there can be fixed or manipulated to one degree or another. I can't speak to all of them. I can speak to cards. One of the most devious little tricks they use is they'll use what they call a high-low stack on a pickup, or what NGC calls a cooler deck. NGC stands for the Nevada Gaming Commission. Okay, and I've had an opportunity to speak to a couple retired NGC officers, and they're classified as peace officers in the state of Nevada. And when I was talking to this individual about the high-low stack, he goes, "Oh, you mean a cooler deck?" And I said, "Is that what you guys call it?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, they do it, but how do you prove it?" And apparently, I don't think NGC cares one way or the other, because if they did, they'd go in there with little pinhole video cameras, and they'd catch these guys doing it. And don't kid yourself for a minute, folks. The reason that they don't want video cameras inside the casinos is not because they're worried about the privacy of their patrons. That's all nonsense. Okay? They're worried about you getting the dealer's hands on video, putting it in the computer, slowing it down, and taking a look-see, and you'll notice some very interesting things that they do. And when you start asking questions, they get very tight-lipped. So,
what are some of the things they do, and what are some of the questions that you might ask? How can you recognize this if you're up there and you're sitting there playing and you think things are just not right? What might not be right, and how can you ask in such a manner that you're not taken out by Vinny and having your hands broken in the back of the casino?
Well, in this day and age, they don't have anything that's really mob-owned or controlled anymore. They're not so crass. This is more of a corporate-owned establishment. And there's a certain, for lack of a better way to put it, there's a bell curve. And by that, what I mean, there's an ebb and flow of wins to losses. And for, I don't know, maybe out of 10 hands, you're probably going to win 4 point something. The house has the edge on you normally. But if they think you're a card counter, they have a couple of different options. They start using what they call countermeasures. And what that means is they'll start putting a high-low stack in the deck on the pickup, which means as the cards get played out, they will pick the cards up in such a way that they have a stack of high-low, high-low, high-low. And when they shuffle a deck tight, either by hand or if they hand it off to a shuffle machine, they're maintaining the stack. In other words, if you stack a deck and you hand it off to a shuffle machine, the shuffle machine is going to stack it, or is going to shuffle perfectly, card for card. It could sit in there for a week and shuffle, and pretty much by the time you get the cards back, you're going to have more or less the same stack deck you had. There might be a little variation, but not enough to make a difference. And what you'll notice is all you get is a long line of crap hands. You don't get any naturals. You don't get any 20s. You'll get 13, 14, 15, 16. You'll get 17 beat by 18. You'll get 19 beat by 20, or you'll get a 5 or 6 card deal by the dealer of 21, and it'll happen more than once. And you just sit there in shock and amazement watching as this all plays out. And
so what do you do? Do you, at a time like that, do you just get up and go to another table?
That's really all you can do, because if you get too loud and too vocal, you just draw unwanted attention to yourself, and they're not going to change what they're doing. One of the little tricks they'll do, and I've noticed this, is that before I sit down, I'll always sit there and stand there and watch the dealer for a while. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking how fast their hands move. I'm looking for how they shuffle the cards. Do they shuffle tight? Do they shuffle loose? Because a loose shuffle what would be called an inaccurate shuffle.
By an amateur, like if you and I shuffle cards. If you and I shuffled cards, not, I don't know how much you play.
The cards are going to clump up here and there.
Right.
Which means you're getting a random shuffle.
Which is supposedly fair, and that's the game.
Exactly.
Keep the table level.
What you find with these people that handle cards for a living is a lot of them will shuffle a very tight shuffle. They'll give you a perfect shuffle. They will divide the deck almost perfectly in half, plus or minus one card. And then they'll shuffle real tight, and it doesn't appreciably change anything in the deck.
You could sit at a table, play the same game over and over again, and everybody ends up losing if they have it set up right. How do they set it up right to shuffle it?
Well, what they'll do is if you sit down to play, you sat there and watched the dealer, you figure, okay, the dealer's kind of got a sloppy shuffle, which means there's a more randomness to it. Okay, and after about 5 or 10 minutes, if you start winning money, they'll come with a relief dealer. And normally in dealer circles, they'll play 40 minutes on and 20 minutes off, sometimes 45 and 15. And so they give their dealers a break once an hour. And what'll happen is the relief dealer will set a stack in the deck. And they'll be there for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. As soon as you see a new dealer come in, if I were you, I'd look at your watch and just pay attention how long this person's there. You know, and I've had it happen where a relief dealer comes in and they're there 45 minutes until I'm out of money. Okay, and to be honest, while I have made money, I've also lost money. And any gambler that's going to be honest is going to tell you they've lost more than they've won.
Right.
I can remember the times I've won big money, but I can count them on one hand too.
Right. Okay, so they take that deck. When they come, they put their own deck in, which presumably is stacked. Is that what you're saying?
No. When the new dealer comes, they'll use the cards that are there, and they'll
have a deck that they brought with them.
Generally not.
You said something along those lines. Would you clarify that for me?
Okay. When a relief dealer comes on, they will stack the deck that's at the table unless the pit boss brings new decks.
Okay.
Which they can do.
How could they stack the deck?
They don't stack a new deck, and you can tell because the new deck has got a seal on it. That's why they put a seal on the deck, and then they'll spread the cards out, and they'll check the backs, they'll check the fronts, so they'll make sure all the numbers are there, and then they'll give them to the dealer, and the dealer will shuffle them. And what happens is the way they put the high-low stack in, it's in the course of play. So as they're playing, you'll see a dealer pick up a card here, card somewhere else, and then swipe what's left. And what I witnessed, I was in a club, and I saw this 7 times. The dealer would do one of two things. They would either pick a low card and stick it between 2 high cards, or they'd do the exact opposite. Take a high card and put it between 2 low cards. And I watched this dealer do this and do this and do this, and the dealer did 6 times, and I didn't say anything. The dealer did the 7th time, and I raised a stink. And I says to the dealer, 7 times now I've watched you do this. Why? The dealer didn't give me any answer.
Why? Because he wanted to win for the house.
Exactly. You know, and people say, well, you know, there's no need to do that. They're not going to risk their gaming license. Understand something. John D. Rockefeller once said that billions of dollars have been made off nickels and dimes. You know, what happens is the people that play the $100 and the no-limit blackjack tables, you know, with private games or no-limit games, I guess is the best way to call them, they keep themselves in practice at a $5 nickel table. And so, you know, that's why the majority of people that live in Nevada don't gamble, because they know the fix is in. See, and the way I found out was because my father lived in Reno for 31 years, And when he retired from Western Union, he dated a couple of blackjack dealers, and they clued him in all the little tricks they do. There's a couple other ones they'll do is they'll second card and they'll peek. It's kind of hard to describe exactly how that's done, but suffice it to say that
they'll know what the card is, and that dealer don't want to deal it.
Exactly, you know. It doesn't go over well for me to try to describe it orally. I'd have to show you what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Suffice to say, from where the player is sitting, the player will never see it because of the way the dealer holds the cards. The dealer will either hold the deck high against their chest while they're dealing cards out, and they'll just flick their wrists and you won't see it come out. And what they do is the deck, the hand that they're holding the deck in, they use their thumb to peel down the top card.
Right.
And then they'll deal you seconds. Like, for instance, if you get dealt 6-5 and you decide, well, I've got 11 and I want to double down. Well, if the dealer's already looked at the top card and knows that the top card's a 10, they just won't deal it to you.
Gotcha.
That's just an example. Usually peeking and second carding go together. It's a little bit easier sometimes to catch that, especially if the dealer makes a mistake. I saw an instance where a dealer made a mistake and there was a card that was sitting in thin air, nothing on top of it, nothing below it. It just hung there, right in front of the dealer's hand. And what that was a second that was caught between the deck and the top card. And then when the dealer saw me looking at it, the dealer just snatched it real fast and threw it down on the table. Well, I raised hell at the time, and my dad, I was sitting with him, we were playing, waiting for a restaurant reservation, and he's just kneeing me into the table like, you know, don't cause a scene, don't, just be quiet, okay? And I'm like, no, screw that, hell with this, you know, and I'm running my mouth, and I'm angry. And
hey, can you see why I like Rich so much? He's so much like me, it's scary. Go ahead, Rich.
So anyway, the pit boss comes over, very matter-of-fact, he says, gentlemen, is there a problem? And I said, yeah, your dealer's second carding people. Well, sir, we don't have any need to cheat in this game, and we're not going to risk our gaming license on a $5 game. But I'll be more than happy to give you my business card and give you the number to the Nevada Gaming Commission if you'd like to lodge a complaint. I said, that'll be fine. So he gives me his business card. It's got the number on it. We go downstairs where the payphones were, because this happened a few years ago when they still had payphones on the wall.
Payphone. Younger listeners, you don't even know what the hell a payphone is. Don't worry about it. You're sleeping through this anyway. So if you don't remember what a payphone is, you don't care about this. It's not important. Go ahead, Rich.
So anyway, I call the number, and this is after hours, so I got routed to the Nevada Highway Patrol. And the lady at the other end of the phone said, well, we'll make a note of it, and we'll be sure to have the people from NGC give you a call. And I said, I'll be here through Tuesday, and this was on a Friday night. Well, needless to say, I didn't get a call. So my dad just looked at me. He says, Rich, these people are not in the business of giving away money. Don't you get it?
Right. And that's basically how you learned the system, how it works, from your dad and your experiences going up there. You've had fun. Yeah,
I've had fun. I've gotten free rooms. I've gotten free meals. But then when you lay out $1,000 and you lose it, you have to ask, well, gee, just how free is it?
And we've talked about this before. It's the sizzle, not the steak, that you dream about. And you're dreaming about that get rich quick type thing like we all do. Some people play the lottery, which is another story. Money that would... you do too.
I got
good.
Yes,
you got
I
your
do.
Lottery thing.
Yes, I do.
What galls me as somebody who fights the Un-Holy Trinity, big business, government, and the church.
The church.
The church, and I mean all organized religion. what galls me about the lottery is that when it was set up in California, and it's been about 25 years now, if I'm not mistaken, it was set up to, the proceeds would go directly to the schools and help with education, which was faltering and which had been in California one of the best in the world, in the country certainly, in the world. And now, and it was faltering, and this was going to save the school system, and they've peeled it off, the lottery proceeds. And first of all, to win the lottery, you gotta be a.
I got a comment for you. You'll like.
You gotta be an undocumented immigrant to win the lottery in California. That's the way it seems. I don't know what it is, but people coming to America, getting rich. By the way, they don't get all that rich coming to America being an undocumented immigrant. That was a joke. Anybody listening out there, they're gonna go, Cuánto de Santa de Noche de Puente. I hate that man. Anyway, go ahead, Rich.
Well, if I can make a couple of comments about that. Understand something. When they sold it to us, they said, "Oh, please, do it for the children." And then what them sanctimonious sons of a bitches do up in Sacramento, to tell you how dishonest the whole thing really is. What they do is they use the stats from the census, and they have their little demographics actuaries crunch numbers, and they say, for a given demographic in this area, how much money do you think they're going to spend on the lottery? And they get a big long stack of numbers from various areas all over across the state of California. And then what they do is they reduce the state budget by that amount of money, which is allocated for education. So what happens? It's a bait and switch. And when the projected monies from the lottery come in, there's no net gain to the schools. So they cut the budget on one hand, and when the lottery receipts come in, it's a wash. And then they take all that money that they cut off the budget and they earmark it for whatever little pet project or little game or little con they have. I mean, the whole thing is set up. These people in Sacramento and most of all in Washington get up every day and they say, how can we steal from the people today and not have them catch on? And it's just...
That's their conscious, their raison d'etre, their reason for being.
Raison d'etre. Raison d'etre. Reason for being, yes, sir.
Yes. All right. Well, I pronounce it with a Yiddish accent.
Oy vey.
Oy vey. I don't know how to pronounce the goddamn thing. But I do know this. I'm going to have to play that last little segment back about 5 times to understand it. But I'm sure the answer is there. All right. You've been great. I want one more thing, and I want you to tell us how people count cards. What does that mean? Like, I'd go if I could only learn to count cards. How much does that actually increase the chances of one winning? And how good do you really have to be? How much attention span do you have to do?
Okay.
And what are the 2 books that you like best about count counting? What are those 2 books?
The 2 best books. Well, I've got over half a dozen books about blackjack, but the 2 best books I think anyone can get who wants to study this game. And understand, you have to be a student of the game. The 2 best books I've seen, one is a very old book. It's gone through numerous editions. It's called Beat the Dealer by Edward Thorpe. Mr. Thorpe was a UCLA math professor, and he used I believe it was an IBM computer in the 70s to crunch numbers and figure out a general betting strategy. And it's commonly referred to as the basic strategy. He's got chapters in there about cheating. He's got chapters in there about various types of card counting. There's a system of counting just 10s or counting just 5s, depending on how many decks you have and things like this. Suffice it to say that an individual's best odds are going to be him versus the dealer, head-to-head on a single-deck game. And you have to realize that the more decks you add and the more people you add, it increases the degree of variability. And if you have 6 decks, the degree of variability is so great you might as well not even bother counting. Okay? The other book was recently turned into a screenplay for the movie 21, and the book is called Bringing Down the House by Ben Mizarek. And he was an MIT student, and the History Channel did a story about this, about the MIT Blackjack team, and how they cooked up a system of counting, and they had spotters that would just play minimal bets, and then they had big money players that they would give a signal to, and they'd come in and lay $10,000 on the table, make 3 or 4 rounds of play as long as the count was high, make a ton of money, and just step off, and nobody caught it. Well, when a few of the casinos in Vegas and Reno got bled for, big money, somewhere close to, if not over $100,000 in a night, they called in their little investigators. And there's a private investigation firm called Griffin Investigations. And all they do, their only clients are the casinos. They go to the cruise ships, they go to the Indian casinos, they go to the Nevada and Atlantic City, the riverboats, anywhere where there's games of chance. Well, Griffin Investigations puts out a book of cheats and slot mechanics and card counters and things of this nature. And once you're in that book, you're pretty well cut off at the ankles. I saw a gentleman once, big money guy, come in playing, sat down for about 10 minutes. And inside of 10 minutes, they had a guy in an Armani suit with 2 uniformed guards come up to him and said, Mr. So-and-so, we thank you for patronizing our casino. We'll be more than happy to comp you a meal, but the house would appreciate it if you didn't play this game. And that's really all it is. And he just said, thank you very much. And he got up and he went over to the craps table. But they weren't having none of his action at the blackjack table. So, like I said, the days of Vito and Rocco taking you downstairs in a dark hall and breaking your hands is pretty much a thing of the past. They're very sophisticated these days. And they're very polished. And they're very subtle. Now, the way you simply count cards is you assign a number value to cards. It's not that difficult. There's a thing called a basic count, and then there's a thing called a running count. And a running count is much more complicated because it takes the number from the basic count and divides it by the number of cards that have been played. I can't do that kind of mathematical gymnastics. There are people that can. And the way the house catches card counters is they look for wild fluctuations in the betting. In other words, if you're sitting at a $25 table and it goes from $25 to $2,000, they're going to sit there and watch when you play $25, $25, $25, and then all of a sudden you go to $1,000. The wild, big ups and big downs, okay? Because they're figuring, and any pit boss can count cards, and so what'll happen is pit boss will sit right on the shoulder of the dealer, and they're going to watch your cards come out, and they're going to watch how you bet. And if your bet fluctuates violently with the count, I don't know what they'll do. They'll probably just say, well, you're a card counter, and we don't want any more of your action. I've never had them come to me because I do something a little bit different with my betting strategy.
What do you do, just out of curiosity, besides lose a little bit?
Well, here's what I've learned, and understand, I play this game probably an hour to an hour and a half every day. I've got a computer game at home, and the computer's got no reason to cheat me, so I figure I'm getting a pretty fair game.
A random,
yes. What I do is I basically play on a betting curve. I start at $50, and every time I win, I'll bump it up a $25 chip. One chip. It doesn't matter if you're sitting at a nickel table or at a $1,000 table. Every time you win, you bump up your bet 1 unit.
Okay.
And what that does, it creates a small progression, like a growth curve. Okay, and it helps to give you more margin so that when cards come bad, you've got a certain margin of safety. Okay, it's not a lot, but a lot of times it can be enough. And if I lose 4 hands in a row at any given bet level, I will double my bet, especially if I'm on a good plus count. And the way when I talk about pluses and minuses, think of it this way. If you read Edward Thorp's book, he'll tell you that 10s and aces should be counted as +1, which means as the cards come out and you see them, you just take +1, +2, +3, +4. And as the small cards come out, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. The 10s and the aces are minus cards. And as you see them, you'll go -1, -2, -3, however many it is, because your advantage is highest when the face cards and the 10s are there. So if you see them get played, you count minus, and that way you know not to bet as much. When you see the small cards come out, it means there's more high cards remaining in the deck. So it would go 2 through 6 would be a +1. Okay, so as you see more of the small cards get played, it means now the deck is 10 rich, and that means you have a better advantage. And the caution that I want to give is that this is not a hard and fast rule. This is not a precise thing, because in between the highs and the lows, there's a medium. And the medium gives enough variability. All card counting will do is give you a rough idea. It is not precise, and I tell people that, it gives you a rough guess, an educated guess on what your chances are for getting a high card or a low card. The most imperative thing I can say is that if you start counting, you must not lose count. Generally, when I've lost money, it's because I've lost count. The other thing I'm starting to notice is you want to pay attention to the cards that you've seen in the previous hand, because that'll help sharpen the focus on what your count is. I'll give you an example. You may have an accurate count, but order in this game is everything, and you can be off order by 1 card, and that's all it takes. Instead of getting the 10 you're looking for, you get the 2. And I can't tell you the number of times it's happened. What I have found is that basically if I go to double up, then essentially the losses I've sustained go from being 4 losses to being 2 losses, which means I can get back even in 2 hands. It's reachable, okay? And if I double up and don't make it, then I let go and I just start all over again at 2 units. And you can do a variation of it. It's a game you're going to have to practice not all day, but every day, because you get conditioned to where you can see a card for a second, and you'll know you'll be able to accurately add it or subtract it from your count, and you won't lose count. Okay.
And at the end of the game, all the cards are open on the board.
Well, they're not open exactly. What happens is...
They're turned over, aren't they?
No, because what happens is the dealer will not deal down to the last card. In Edward Thorp's book...
10 minutes.
In Edward Thorp's book, there was a chapter on it called end play. And end play meant that if you get dealt all the way down to the bottom of the deck, you know basically what the last 5 cards are going to be.
If you've counted.
If you've counted, yes.
If you haven't missed one.
If you haven't missed one. Now I'll give you an example. The count that Edward Thorp's book describes is different than the one that I described. And I changed my own rule because what I found was if you have 11 in your hand and you have a high plus count, you have a 1 in 5 chance of drawing an ace. An 11 plus ace gives you a grand total of 12.
Right.
So you're doubly hosed.
Well, you make it a 13, and then what do you got to get?
Well, on a single deck game, you can only double down on 10 or 11. So what I did was, instead of counting the ace as a high card, I counted it as a low card, because ones ain't going to hurt you.
Right.
Okay, so my low card range is ace through 5. My high cards are 9s and 10s, because 9 and 10s is always going to be 9 and 10. And the 3 middle cards are 6, 7, and 8. And guess what that adds up to? 21.
Oh, 21.
21. Yes, it does. So that's just the spin that I put it on myself. And I found that if I've got 10 and I got a high card, high plus count, I can either draw the 10 or the ace, and either way it'll still work.
Yeah.
If I've got 11 and I draw a 9, that's 20. That's still good. See, so you know,
it's a nice little system.
It's just, you got to play with it. And what I found is, trying to push it all the way to the $500 level, 7 out of 8 times you're going to lose, because when you get to the top dead center of the bell curve, you're still safe. When you start going past the center on the far side, your margin of safety shrinks. So instead of trying to make the big win of $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, it's a whole lot easier to make a win of $1,000, $1,200, $1,500. And when you get past $250, which is the top dead center, if you lose, you just start over.
Right.
So instead of trying to eat the elephant in one bite, you just gnaw at the elephant a little bit, you know? Take a couple of bites, swallow, take a couple more bites and swallow, you know?
Do it slowly, make it
make it fun.
Yeah.
You know, and here's the thing. If you hit half a dozen casinos for $1,000 to $1,500 in a weekend, that's a lot of money. And the funny thing is, if you walk up, what I do is I'll lay $1,000 out, and the most I'll take is $1,500, because $1,500 in winnings plus $1,000 is $2,500. Well, if you walk up to the window with less than $2,500, nobody gives you an IRS form. You just smile and say thank you very much and go on your merry way, and it doesn't raise hackles. Nobody pays any attention, you know. And what is it, you know? Good news is no news. You stay off the radar and everybody's polite.
Beautiful. Hey, Rich, thanks for being here. This was a great first visit to our airways. We are comfortably zoned, Alameda, California, right near San Francisco, California, in beautiful Bay Area. And I'm going to close out the segment in a manner that Rich has never heard. You haven't heard my show before. I implore people at the end of my show to keep their humor dry and their dreams wet. Keep their kids off the laps of clerics wearing dresses. It always works out for the whole family much better, and it works out for the community. If you could remember that, it's a simple thing to remember. As I've said before, Jews never have a problem with it. You'll never hear a Jew saying, "Here, Mrs. Wang, you drive over to the church with my kid and leave him with Father O'Brien to babysit." You never hear a Jewish guy say that, so I'm not used to it, but apparently in a Gentile world they say that a lot, so you better not say that. And you better not ever have that happen. And you might keep your kid away from recruiting stations. Military recruiting stations are bad for everybody. You give your child that you raise to a military recruiter, and they will, in one manner or another, send your child back a whole lot differently than you gave them your kid. war is bad, supporting war is bad, thinking about war is bad, imperialism is bad, nationalism is bad, but you're a good audience. So the world is what it is. I appreciate the few people that listen. I appreciate my guests. They're always interesting. Rich, let me ask you this. Did you have fun being comfortably zoned?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the next time we can do it.
All right, what are we going to talk about? Spirituality or the Kennedy thing?
We'll talk about Kennedy.
All right, maybe we could forego spirituality forever. It wouldn't hurt my feelings. But Kennedy would be nice to talk about. Are you on Facebook, Rich?
No, I'm not. I don't believe in putting my information out there for the whole world to see. I mean, imagine if the CIA tried to steal your information. Everybody would be up in arms.
Imagine if they gave a rat's ass about me. That's how I look at it. I mean, you know who they're concerned about? Who the CIA is most concerned about? Is how they can top the FBI. Or they're not very concerned about me. They're concerned about people who they profile specifically to stop terrorism. Rich interrupts because you have a different philosophical view about that.
Keep something in mind, ladies and gentlemen. The NSA and the CIA couldn't give a tinker's damn about you or me, the average American, whether we have internet porn or whether, I don't know, fill in whatever vice you have. What the system cares about are the congressmen, the senators, the judges, the doctors and lawyers that got big money, Bill Gates, people like this, movers and shakers financially, because what these people believe in doing is getting leverage, and especially with congressmen and senators. If you look at Justice Alito, when he ruled on Obamacare, he rendered a decision that was so out of character given his past history that people have said openly, as I'm saying now, that he was gotten to somehow.
Well, these are the same group of folks who were gotten to when they decided the election. When Bush was elected, Bush Jr. was elected the first time. I remember where I was that moment. I was about to go through the tunnel in Alameda to Oakland, and I heard that the Supreme Court, without counting votes in Florida, decided enough was enough, that they were going to make a decision based on they were gotten to. There was no question in my mind about that. That Daddy Bush, who had been the head of the CIA at one time and who supervised Ollie North, given money to the Contras, specifically voted against by Congress with Reagan's permission or without his knowledge, which is even worse because then he was totally demented by that time.
They tried
instead
to kill
of
him.
half that time. Well,
President Reagan had an attempted assassination within 3 months of his swearing in, and his vice president was George Bush. John Hinckley is tied to the Bush family. Hinckley's family and Bush's family know one another. How convenient it would have been had George Bush been president in April 1st of 1981.
Well, when we get to the Kennedys, here's a little hint. How convenient was it for Johnson in the state of Texas to become president when the Kennedys weren't even going to consider him to run on the ticket the second time? And my feeling on that is he conspired with Hoover, who was another one who hated Bobby Kennedy and vice versa, and he would have been forced to retire because he was over the retirement age, and he got to stay on under Johnson. So it's my considered opinion that of all the people who could and may have offed Kennedy and wanted to off Kennedy, nobody had the most to lose and the most to gain by not offing Kennedy than Johnson and Hoover. So was that a pretty good teaser for what we talk about next time?
I think so, except for the fact that the oil people in Texas stood to lose tens, if not hundreds of millions in tax revenue because one of the things Kennedy was going to do was rescind a tax credit. The other ones that were going to lose millions of dollars was the Federal Reserve System because Kennedy put out an executive order to print interest-free United States notes. And the Fed just was not going to have that. So while LBJ and J. Edgar were involved in the cover-up, I don't think the assassination was done with them at the top. You know, Hoover and LBJ were just stooges. LBJ was...
Wait a minute. LBJ was a big force in Texas.
He was the senator from Texaco, just like Lloyd Benson, yes.
Right, okay. And Hoover was by no means a stooge. He had all the information. Remember, Martin Luther King, everybody had everybody's dirty underwear out there, except his own. His was his.
Yeah, that he was a closet homosexual with his friend. Right. But do not misunderstand what I mean when I say he was a stooge. The two biggest people that had the most financially to lose was the Fed and with the oil money, and then thirdly,
trumps a lot of the individual aspirations, as it were.
What I'm saying basically is LBJ didn't engineer this together. He didn't do all the detail work. He kind of arrived on the scene after the fact, knowing that it would be him that would cover up the stuff and that J. Edgar would hide any conflicting evidence. But they weren't the ones that put the gears into motion. They basically talked to him. Well, how would you feel about this? Here's what you get.
Just fine, partner.
Yeah.
How do you think I'd feel?
Yeah.
Get it done.
He gets to be president.
Right, McBird. Do you remember McBird? There was a play written right after he died. I can't remember who wrote it. It was a satirical play about Kennedy, about Johnson taking over.
There are a lot of players. The CIA was a big player because the CIA was trying to start the war in Indochina just like they did the Bay of Pigs. And after Kennedy ended up with egg on his face over the Bay of Pigs, and he started to understand that what's going on in Indochina is more the same, he said, oh no, we ain't having no more of this.
Well, he was a hawk in Vietnam, was Kennedy.
Well, here's the problem. He was until he started to understand that what the CIA was doing. When you see the White House interview on the day of his inauguration, when he's sitting there on the lawn with Walter Cronkite, and he talks about the domino theory, and he says, well, we have to stop the communist aggression in Indochina, because if not, it'll go to the Philippines, and then it'll go to Japan, and then it'll be knocking on our door in Hawaii.
Right.
Well, that was at the beginning of his presidency. Then came the Bay of Pigs.
Right.
And
an Eisenhower fiasco, really, because he failed either on purpose or not.
It wasn't even Eisenhower, it was Nixon.
As vice president?
Nixon as vice president under Eisenhower was the one that gave the go-ahead order to Allen Dulles to launch the Bay of Pigs.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Understand something. Eisenhower was the Republican president who, when he left office, said what? Beware the military-industrial complex.
That's true.
This is not a man that wanted war anywhere else. He'd seen war.
Yeah.
Okay, but the other major important interests was all the arms manufacturers. You got Winchester, you got Colt, you got Grumman, you got McDonnell Douglas, you got FMC Corp, Chrysler, General Motors. All these people that were going to be spending money for the war effort in Vietnam.
To say nothing of the mafia, the Cubans, the Russians that might have been in on it. Will we ever? We probably won't ever know, because records were sealed for 75 years, so they must be hiding something.
Well, absolutely. Stop and think about it. If at the time they put the kibosh on it because there was concern that it might cause war with Russia. If they did investigation into Cuba and it turned out that the Cubans were involved, remember what something that Fidel Castro said. He said, to accuse me and Cuba of being involved in the assassination of JFK, he said it would be pure insanity on my part. He said that would give them the exact impetus they needed for an invasion, for a cause of war. And I think as we look back on the fall of the Soviet Union, there's been a lot of documents that have been declassified. Turns out the KGB did their own study of who killed President Kennedy. And what they found was that it was a joint operation between the Mafia and the CIA because both parties had something to gain.
As if they didn't.
Absolutely. You know, Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, he started to understand that what's going on in Vietnam is more of the same. And he said, no, we're not having this. And to that effect, he published a thing that was called an INSAM, which is a National Security Action Memorandum. It was INSAM 263 that said that they were going to start withdrawing advisors 1,000 per month from South Vietnam. And Oliver Stone, to his credit, when he made the movie JFK, he included a video clip of a press conference at the National Press Club where President Kennedy spoke in July of '63, and he said, by this time next year, there will be no U.S. Personnel in South Vietnam. Why? Because Kennedy was looking at a re-election. So the CIA says, oh no, our big investment's going to go sideways. Oh no, we're going to lose billions of dollars. Well, you know what? Will they kill a president over that? You betcha.
They would.
In a hot second. Now, you know, certainly, my perspective and my thought, and I have nothing to back this up, but my suspicion is that it was Texas oil money which financed it. But it was the CIA and the Mafia that actually were involved in the shooting. Because understand something. At the time, the CIA had a thing called ZR rifles, and it was an assassination team that was directed against Fidel Castro. And at the time, both the mob and the CIA wanted Castro out of office. So they put this little team together. And guess who they answered to? They answered to none other than Bobby Kennedy.
Really?
Yes. So, how hard is it, if you're targeting one foreign head of state, how hard is it to simply change focus? Especially when the second head of state can directly and negatively and permanently affect your organizations. Bobby Kennedy was attacking the mob openly, okay, and he was and John was getting ready to shut down the CIA. He was either going to shut them down completely, or he was going to handcuff them to the Department of Defense so that they couldn't just act arbitrarily, go into other countries, stir up shit, and then drop it in the lap of the U.S. He said, no, there's going to be some purview and some control on the CIA, or I'm just going to get rid of the CIA completely. And if you look at what happened with the Bay of Pigs, when Allen Dulles basically goes to Kennedy and says, I need air support, well, for what? Well, we're currently invading Cuba as we speak. And Kennedy was taken aback and said, on whose authority? And Allen Dulles basically said, on the authority of the previous administration. It had already been signed.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Allen Dulles got fired over that. Well, gee, isn't it fascinating that the Warren Commission has Allen Dulles?
And Gerald Ford.
Congressman Gerald Ford.
Right, who was a congressman for 38 frickin' years and never once got a bill passed in his name in 38 years. He was a one of those guys, go along to get along kind of guy, and he got his reward, and he immediately pardoned Nixon. I remember the day he did, because I was the old man. I was in Las Vegas at the time on an insurance convention, and who was playing in Las Vegas? Frank Sinatra.
The Rat Pack.
Not the Rat Pack, but Frank Jr., Frank, and Nancy all playing on the same bill at Caesar's Palace, and I was there with some insurance convention. I was a young go-getter. It was 1975 or something like that, or 5, I think it
It'd be
was.
1974, because
74, right?
Ford was
right.
president in 1975, and if you want really something fascinating to think of, when Nixon has already made phone calls, and he knows the House is going to impeach him, and he knows he doesn't have the votes in the Senate, and he's going to get ousted.
Right, he needed to be pardoned.
He picked somebody to be the replacement for Spiro Agnew.
Who took a bundle of money in a paper bag as the governor of Maryland.
Spiro Agnew is not that important, but here's the question, or here's the observation. Out of all the people that he could have chosen to replace Spiro Agnew, who does he choose? Congressman Gerald Ford. Why? Out of 535 people between the House and Senate, Ford's chance of being picked at random was 1/5 of 1%.
Well, you could say that about anybody he would have picked.
Yeah, but doesn't the Constitution say that...
Sorry guys, I have to take in the chairs now.
Doesn't the Constitution say that the number 3 man in the order of succession should be the Speaker of the House? I believe it does. So, how is it that Congressman Ford gets chosen? I'll tell you, because Congressman Ford was on the Warren Commission. Now, here's something really fascinating. When Jimmy Hoffa gets out of prison, he goes to the Teamsters. He wants to get his seat back as president of the Teamsters. Okay? The guy that he let be a placeholder, a guy named Frank Fitzsimmons, is just not going to give up his seat. So Jimmy's a little upset. Jimmy comes from Detroit, Michigan. Guess where Gerald Ford comes from? Detroit, Michigan.
Right.
Exactly. So Jimmy goes to see Jerry, who's now President Ford. And about 2, maybe 3 days later, Jimmy disappears. And Jimmy disappears under some very strange circumstances. And everybody wants to say that the mob killed Jimmy Hoffa. Well, every time the mob ever killed somebody, they did it public, messy, right in front of God and everybody. They didn't give a damn who saw it. And you weren't going to say nothing, and you were going to join the guy they just blasted. Right? And the FBI or the local cops come in and say, did anybody see what happened? And everybody puts their head down and says, no, man, I didn't see nothing. Okay? What happened to Jimmy Hoffa was so slick that it remains a mystery to this day, and it was executed with the precision of a military operation. This one does not spell MOB, boys and girls. This spells CIA.
All right. Hey, am I the best producer in podcast radio in the whole world? I'm always talking to interesting people, and you're one of them, Rich. Take care, my friend. Over and out, everybody. You got anything to say before I go over and out?
Not really. We'll wait till our next conversation.
All right, we'll continue it. And thanks, man. I'll send you a link to it however I do.
All right.
All right.
It's good.
Thanks again.